Hey guys, it's Leo with Dreaming Tree, and today we're going to put together our beautiful autumn topiary. And there are a total of 10 flowers on the topiary, and I've done some pre-assembly on the flowers here. As you can see, we did 5 in a cherry color and 5 in an apricot color. So I have 8 of these already put together. I'm going to walk you through 2 of them. So actually, let's just get started. We're going to first begin by putting our base together, and it's pretty straightforward. It's a very symmetrical piece, so there are 4 identical pieces. We've got a panel that I embossed with a Tim Holtz embossing folder. Now this folder is a little bit thicker than your standard folder. I actually had to remove one of the plates in my Cuttlebug to actually get it to emboss. So let's just get started here with the assembly of the actual little planter or pot, whatever you want to call it. We're going to take these large pieces here, these 4 large pieces, and you want to go ahead and get everything nice and folded. I've got my texture side out, so I want to make sure that you can see that beautiful texture. And we're done putting this thing together. And before we put this together, I always like to work flat whenever possible. I'm gonna put this back out like this, and we're just gonna glue our panels on before we get into the construction. Okay, so they're gonna go on just like that, and then we can go ahead and put this together. So just nice and easy. Get our glue on there. Make sure you get some glue out to the edges so that it looks nice and finished all the way around. Okay, and you want to just make sure that you have a nice even border going all the way around this piece here. If you're off just a smidge, it's not the end of the world, but with this this glue here, you've got a few seconds to kind of adjust things and scooch things around until it really gets a permanent hold. So do your best to get that on there. The flowers on this project, that's probably going to be the most time-consuming process. It's very easy. As long as you can get these pieces cut out, I guarantee that you can put this beautiful topiary together. It's not difficult by any means. You just have to invest a little bit of time. But one thing I've noticed over the years is the more time I invest in a project when it comes to assembly, and even my team, Ron and Diana, Ron who conceptualizes all these ideas and drafts them out, and Diana who engineers them and brings them to life, seems like the longer things take, the more time we put into them, the more thought we put into it, the more love we put into it, the more amazing these projects end up turning out. And that just feels good to see a really beautiful project come together, because sometimes it's a little repetitive. But I actually had a conversation with Ron about this, and I'm still just putting these panels on. If you see this as work, then I guess maybe you got the wrong hobby, because typically I actually have learned to appreciate the repetitive stuff lately, because typically just get into just like a really zen mode, a very meditative state where you just kind of zone out and your brain is firing on all cylinders, almost, but it's like your hands are just kind of taking over and it quiets the mind. And I think it's just good for your health. So don't ever call it work, because it's not really work. It's a fun hobby, a fun process, and the results are going to be amazing. So I've got my 4 panels on here, okay? And we can go ahead and begin putting this together. So what you want to do is, once you have this on there, and you could have technically done this beforehand. Just kind of train the paper so it's kind of at an angle a little bit, because this little pot angles out at the top. Okay, so I'm just kind of just taking the top and just bending it slightly. That's probably all you'll need. Okay, so usually you can do this, well, it doesn't matter when you do it really. I'm just doing it now because I kind of didn't think about it before. If you want, you can train the paper and curve it a little bit before you actually put the panel on, but either way, it's still gonna turn out just fine. So I'm gonna start at the top here, and I'm just gonna do one little triangle at a time, just because it's gonna be more precise if I do it that way. And you wanna make sure that you're getting this at the correct angle at the top, that the top is nice and flush, okay? And just kind of hold that and pinch it between your fingers until that glue really sets, okay? And then you can see how the rest of it kind of falls into place. You just have to bend it just ever so slightly to get that angle. And I'm just pushing this down on my table. I'm not gonna be able to do that with the other pieces because it's gonna be dimensional, but for the sake of moving on here, I'm gonna put glue on the next little tab. And I'm just gonna spread that thin so it doesn't take as long to dry. And again, just make sure that you're following that nice angle there and that it's right up next to it. Okay, that should probably be enough time. We'll flip this next little tab down and get our glue on it. And get that in place. Just make sure that you're kind of aligning it so that you've got a nice edge here. You don't want to overlap it too much. You don't want to underlap it, if that's even a word. Okay, give it a good squeeze. Now we'll bring that large tab down and get our glue on there. Do your best to get it all the way out to that edge so that we get a nice clean seam there. And run your finger along that edge there, making sure that they line up nicely. You could technically, well, no, you don't want to put that down on your table because this is angled and it might kind of tear away. So just take your time, add some pressure along that tab all the way up and down until you've got a nice clean seam there, and that looks great. Okay, so as you probably have guessed, we're just going to continue this process here, and I'm going to go ahead and curve this a little bit. I'm just kind of squeezing it and bending it a little bit. So I'm adding pressure here in the middle where I want it to start. You want it to start to curve right where these teeth are. Okay, so we're kind of just adding, I'm just kind of pushing it right there to get it to kind of angle a little bit. Not much, just a little bit. Once you start gluing it, it will figure out where it needs to go on its own, but we're just kind of helping it by kind of warping it and shaping it a little bit. Okay, so again, just make sure that these angles meet nicely. The top is nice and flush, and just hold that between your two fingers until you know for a fact that it's nice and it's not going to be totally dry, but it'll be mostly dry, enough to where we can continue on with the next step here. Okay, so there we go. I'm pretty confident that that took, so I'm going to move on to the next tab here. And as I'm putting this glue down, my nozzle is actually resting on the paper, and that helps it spread out and come out nice and thin. And then I can actually use the nozzle to move that glue around and spread it even thinner. My finger does a better job, but for a small little tab like that, I think the nozzle's fine. And I'm just squeezing to get that glue to really penetrate those little fibers in there and dry a lot faster, so I can move on to the next little tab here. Okay, again, just kind of getting my glue on there, making sure that I'm following the nice curve of this little flower pot, this topiary pot. I love this little texture we have going here. It's really cute. Like I said, I had to kind of play around with the little plates that come with my embossing machine because it wouldn't fit using the standard A and B plates on the Cuttlebug. I had to actually get rid of one of the entire plate for it to go through. It's just a much thicker embossing folder for some reason. And it's not your standard white color, it was like an orange color. I have it in my folder, and we'll try to show it to you before the end of this video. Okay, so last tab here on this side, and I've got my fingers in here like this, pushing up, and then I'm using my thumb to push down against that. So I'm kind of squeezing it in midair. Okay, there we go. Get that tab nice and secure. Yeah, and we're almost done. Got 2 more little sections like that to do, and we'll be good to go here in not that long. Okay, so again, I'm just taking this and kind of just curling it ever so slightly. Okay, just adding a little bend to it. You don't need much. All right, and let's go ahead and close this up. So definitely recommend embossing that panel to give it some life and some texture. If you just put if you're gonna put just a solid piece of paper on there, I think it's best if it was a patterned piece of paper, so you can add a little interest to your project. I mean, there's no rule saying you can't just do another solid piece, but if you do a solid piece, make sure that you've got some nice contrast on there. And again, there's no rule saying you have to do that either, but just kind of giving you my little tips here. But definitely invest in an embossing machine if you don't already have one. It just takes your projects to a whole nother level. And that's a very cliche thing to say, but it is true. It takes them to another dimension. They're still on Earth, but not that kind of dimension. But it really does add a lot to your project. And you know, it catches your eye. It just adds a lot more interest. Okay, see that last tab in there? You can kind of see it, I'm pointing to it there. Getting our glue on there. Spreading it thin, trying to get it out to the edge. And again, making sure that I'm following the nice curve, because you can see that it angles out. So you can't just glue it flat. You gotta make sure that you're kind of pulling and pushing the paper around until you've got a nice, even and lined up seam. Okay, so I'm gonna go back in here and get that glue on that long tab in there, which you guys have already seen a few times. It's gonna get a little more difficult for me to show you this stuff during this process because I'm working in a tight spot. But again, got my finger underneath, kind of acting as the table, and now I'm pushing down with my 2 thumbs here and kind of using my pointer fingers to make some little slight adjustments to make sure that I've got this nice and lined up and in the correct alignment with the other piece. Okay, and that looks perfect. All right, so we can go ahead and close this up now. And not much, it's not really that different of a process here. We're just closing it up. Same order of steps, same amount of steps. Okay, and again, just make sure that you're getting it at that right angle. This part might be overlapping here. That's okay. Focus on just this part up here and make sure that you've got it nice and perfectly aligned. This is like our little anchor point. The rest of this will fall into place, and the glue will ensure that it stays in place. Okay, so now it's gonna be a little tough, but you're just gonna have to work from the inside. Okay, so I've got my tab here. You can see it there. I'm gonna go ahead and get my glue on there. Spread it nice and thin if you can. In this case, I'm probably gonna have a little bit of glue that shoots out. You can see it there. I'm just gonna scrape it up with my finger. Okay, just rub it off. It's fine. There we go. And just hold that in place until it sets. And that just leaves 2 more little tabs. Well, 1 tiny little triangular tab. You can see it there. It's kind of lifted up just ever so slightly. And get your glue on there. Try to keep it thin if you can. and get it nice and aligned and just squeeze. And hold that in place until it's completely set. Okay. So this shouldn't take more than, I don't know, 10 minutes at the most getting this thing together as far as the little container goes. Okay, so that just leaves the large tab there. You can see the little shadow there. Okay, and do your best to work that glue in there. And then I'm not overly concerned about spreading it. I think that I placed it pretty much in the middle there, so it is going to kind of squeeze out both ways, and I'm getting just enough coverage there to make my box or my little planter nice and perfect. Okay, there we go. All right, so that's pretty much it. Now what we're going to do is we're going to put our bottom on. Now you'll notice that we have two pieces like this. One has little notches, they're like little L's and backwards L's on here. This is going to go on the bottom here, and these little indicators are for the little feet that we're going to glue on. I've already done a little pre-assembly there, so you want to put that on the bottom here. And what I'd suggest doing is taking a look around and finding which side you think is your favorite, which side has the nicest seams. I think this side is my favorite. So I'm going to pretend that that's my front, or this can be my front. That's fine. We're going to start by gluing the bottom on, just one tab at a time. This is going to be our little anchor tab. Okay, I'm spreading that glue out nice and thin, getting it right out to the edge. You can use a little brush if you don't want to use your fingers, however you want to do it. Okay, and get that nice and centered. Make sure that you've got it nice and aligned. Okay, that's good. Give it a few seconds to get its initial hold. Make sure it's nice and centered, and then you can put it down on your surface and push down to get that to sit and to set quickly. All right, and then we're just going to close this up. We're going to put glue on the remaining tabs here, nice and thin. Get a little bit out to the edge so we can spread that thin with our finger or our brush or whatever tool you want to use. Okay, and I'm just going to spread that right out to the edge. And because it's at an angle, it's hard for it to encroach on the other dimension or the actual panel itself. All right, so flip these out a little bit so that as you're pushing this down, it grabs more of that surface, and then just push down and run your finger along the edge here. Make sure that you've got it nice and perfectly lined up. If you don't get all the sides to stick perfectly, don't worry about it. You can always go in and fix things if you need to. You've probably seen that in some of my past videos, and I'll probably end up having to show you here what I do to correct that. You can see here, there's a tiny little gap there. I don't like that. Okay, so you can use a spatula, like the one you use for your, to get your stuff off the mat, like the Cricut spatula or the Silhouette spatula. I like razor blades because they're thinner, and I just take a little bit of glue, put it on one side of the razor blade, and then I can literally just kind of shove it right in there and just rub it along the top part of that paper, and then just push that down and literally hold it until it completely sets. And then that way I have a nice, beautiful, clean seam and a nice, perfect project. Okay, it kind of happens really quick. You can see how much nicer that looks now as opposed to that or that. Okay, so I'm just going to go around and clean that up because I'm a perfectionist and that's how I like it. You don't have to, but I don't know. I just think it's cool and nice and finished looking, nice and professional. Okay, there we go. Just holding that in place while it sets. It doesn't take long. Okay, moving on to the next side. You know, when you're trying to get glue down, oops, that's going to be messy potentially. I need to get rid of that. When you're trying to put glue down on all these surfaces at the same time, you know, it can be kind of challenging to make sure that you're getting the glue into every little nook and cranny. And, you know, some people may say, well, you know, if you use like tape runner or, you know, the tape instead of glue, you may not run into that problem. And they're probably right, but I just, I don't like the tape when I'm dealing with 3D projects like this, because once it's on there and you put your paper down, there's almost like no turning back. And I think there is some repositionable stuff, but I just, you know, you kind of get stuck in your old ways, and I don't want to have to deal with that. I like my glue. It's been good to me. Okay, so I'm just closing that up, getting it nice and clean, nice and seamless. There we go. Okay, so our box is coming together here. We may as well put our little feet on. Now, I've already put together 3 of these boxes. I'm going to show you how to do one. Oh, before we do that, this other square here, that's going to go inside. So what we want to do is just put glue on the actual tab portion on the inside. It doesn't have to be pretty. As you can see, it's kind of just whatever. And just pop that in and push it down. And that's going to help reinforce this piece, make it a little more sturdier, and add a little bit more support to the bottom. Okay, I'm going to flip it over. I'm going to grab one of these pieces. Now you're going to do this 4 times total, since there's 4 little feet. You want to begin by just folding everything at the score marks. Okay. So there's score marks there. I'm folding it kind of backwards right now because it's easier to work with that way. And we're going to bring this back in. We're going to put glue on this triangular tab here on my brown piece. I'm going to dab that just to kind of thin it out. And I'm going to move these tabs out of the way. I'm going to connect this side to the other side to create a box. Okay, and get that nice and aligned. Now, I might actually need to put more glue on there because I took way too much time doing that. So I'm going to try that one more time. There we go. And get that nice and aligned. Just creating a little box. Okay, and then you can kind of flip these out of the way and stick your finger in there to push that tab down nicely. It's pretty much already dry, but I like to kind of get in there and push it a little more. Okay, so now we're going to take these little pyramid looking tabs and put glue on them, all 3. Okay, I'm going to spread that out nice and thin out to the edge. Okay, and push those in, grab your top or bottom, and we're going to close that down. Just kind of hold it in your hand with your 2 hands and run your fingers, or kind of sandwich it. Just make sure that all the sides are holding nicely. I'm going to take a little dowel and just push from the inside to get that glue to really stick. Okay, and there's our bottom. And all we're going to do is the same exact thing with this side. Just going to get our glue on the feet, or on the tabs, I should say, to create the feet. Sometimes my mind is like 2 steps behind. Okay, there we go. Just close that up. And you may need to kind of nudge things from the left, the top, and the right to kind of get them in place. You want that to be nice and flush. Just make a cute little box. Just remind me of like little graham crackers or little chocolate nuggets or something. I don't even know. Okay, here we go. All right, so we have 4 of those, and based on these little notches here, you're just going to position these right on there like that. Okay. Before we do that though, I actually want to go ahead and put this little scallop piece in here first. And basically all we're doing go. Okay, so I'm sorry, we actually want this piece here. And what we're going to do is we're going to connect these pieces, okay, like that. And then we're going to put it all together. You want to go ahead and fold everything at the score marks here. It's basically going to go like this, okay, just like that. So we're going to glue that to the inside of the box here in a second. But before we do, we can go ahead and put these little overlays on here. It's best to do that while it's flat. So I'm just going to go ahead and begin. Just putting my glue on the back side of this thing. I also inked this with a nice red color or an orange color. So we did this in a yellow. It just kind of makes it look nicer. And all these pieces are identical. So it doesn't matter which one you select to put down. Just make sure that you're getting it nice and lined up with the little cutouts on the piece behind it. Okay. And just push that down, get it in place, and then move on over to the next one. This part of it's pretty simple. Now if you want, while I'm thinking about it, to weigh this thing down, you may want to put some little pebbles in here because it is paper, so it's going to be pretty light. I'd probably put some pebbles in here to weigh it down a little bit in the bottom of your box, or the little planter, I should say. And that way it won't get knocked over because it is going to be a little top heavy. It is a topiary. So let's move that out of the way. And let's fold this as well. Let's get this kind of trained and ready for action. Okay. Put that back down on my table. And let's get our glue on this piece here. We don't need a lot, just a little bit. Okay, and again, just line it up with the little cutouts on the piece underneath it. If you have a little glue shooting out, just kind of rub it off. Get that nice and aligned. But yeah, put some pebbles in the bottom of this thing, something to weigh it down a little bit. And then that way you don't have to worry about it getting tipped over. And we're going to put some foam in here. And we're going to put the topiary in there, the actual floral part. It's going to look really cool. Okay, I have some glue that's a little out of control here. Okay, just get that nice and lined up. Rub off any excess glue that you may have. There we go. Okay. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to connect these pieces. You can see this little piece here. We're going to go ahead and put glue on that. I'm going to thin it out a little bit and just glue that right onto that piece there. And just hold that in place while it sets. Okay, and then we can go ahead and do the same thing on the other side here to close it up. Just like that. Okay, so this piece is pretty much ready to go. Okay, so got this piece all ready to go, and basically what we're doing is we're taking the tab part of this, the folded part, and we're just gonna squeeze it in there. Okay, and it should basically stick out just like that. Okay, so you see that there, and actually want it up just a little bit so that we have Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and take this, and I think the best way to do this would be to just take just a very thin line of glue. You don't want it to be caked because we are gonna be kind of gliding this in there. Just put some glue along the top of this. It doesn't have to be exactly right at the top, just as long as it's near the top. Okay, we're gonna take this and just kind of slide it in. Make sure you're sliding it over the glue. Okay, and this should be pretty much flush with the other parts, with the base of it that we just put together and constructed. Okay, should be nice and flush there, and then just take your finger and squeeze to get that glue to hold that in place. It seems to be working just fine. Okay, there we go. There's a nice little scallop detail on our little planter. Okay, we can go ahead and flip this over and get our little feet in place. So I'm just gonna go ahead and put glue on the bottom of this, and I'm gonna kind of put a nice layer of glue on there, just so that I know I have enough. And I also want to get it out to the edges as nicely as possible. Okay, and try to find the side that had the lid kind of built into it, and just glue that right on there. Make sure that you're following the little guides that are kind of stamped into this thing, or cut into it, I should say. Okay, and just repeat 3 more times. Get it out to that edge so that you don't have half of this thing kind of hanging off or whatever. I'm going to take a photo of the underside of my desk so you guys can see what kind of mess I have under there as far as my glue goes. Okay, that looks good. All right, let's just finish this off. So that's all you're gonna do. You're just gonna repeat that until you have all 4 of your legs on there. Okay, and then we can go ahead and begin discussing the floral part of it, which will go pretty quick. I mean, relatively speaking. In the video, it'll go quick because I've already done a lot of pre-assembly. Like I said, I made 8 of the flowers already. We'll make 2 of them on camera with you. Okay, I'm just kind of pushing that down, letting that set. And last but not least, our 4th and final little foot. Okay, just to use those little guides there to make sure that you've got it properly aligned. And just push down, make sure that it just gets a good hold. And that's pretty much it. You can go ahead and flip it over and push down like that. Okay, there we go. All right, so that is gonna set. And we can kind of right now just discuss the little foam, okay? We'll make sure that we have a supply list. But basically this thing, you want it to kind of fit in, leave a little room so that you're not like squishing it. But as far as the height on this is roughly 2.5 inches. 3.5 inches high. It is 1, 2, 3, just a tad over 3 inches wide. And then it is roughly 2.5 inches deep. Okay, so you want to cut this into those dimensions. I'll go over that one more time. It's 1, 2, 3, roughly 3.5 inches tall. It is 1, 2, 3, and I wouldn't even go a quarter, I'd go an eighth, about 3 1/8 inches wide. And then when we flip it, it is roughly 1, 2.5 inches deep. Okay, so what you're going to want to do is take that. I'm going to put hot glue on the bottom of this. Uh-oh. My hot glue gun is not happy. I'm going to go ahead and get my hot glue on the bottom of this. Oh yeah, that's quite a lot, but just had a new stick going there, so that's okay. Oh, that smells funny. Okay, and just pop that right in there. You might want to leave a little bit of room on either side so that you can put some little stones in there. Okay, just make sure that I already have a hole in here for my dowel. Okay, just try to make sure that you've got that nice and centered as well. It looks like I do. That looks good. Okay, I also took this dowel, and this is a, I think this is a 1/2-inch dowel. It is, and I painted it an olive green color. You can paint yours whatever color you want. You can use florist tape if you prefer to do that. Totally up to you. Okay, so you got that in there. Like I said, there's a little bit of gap on both sides to kind of weigh this down with whatever it is you want to use to weigh it down. And that's sitting nice and in place. Now, as far as getting your dowel in there, if you want to kind of start it, use some scissors or something pointy just to kind of get it going, and then eventually you can just jam it right in there. Okay, and just make sure that you have it nice and level, nice and vertically aligned. Okay, that looks good. Anyway, we're pretty much done with this, okay? The last, what we're gonna do then is just put some crinkle fill in here to cover this up. I'm not gonna worry about that right now. You'll see that in the final photo. This we can basically put to the side for now. We're done with it. And we can begin working and constructing our little flowers here. So I'll just go over all the parts here. Oh, you're also gonna need a styrofoam ball. We give you the dimensions in the, I think it's a 3-inch ball, but check your supply list on the website or your PDF for the complete details here. Let's talk about this piece here. Okay, each of the flowers has a set of little leaves, okay, and you also have a bunch of these little pieces here. Now the reason we did this is because we wanted the leaves to be one tone, while these little tendrils, we wanted to have those a different tone, a lighter shade. So we separated them. So you've got a little bit of gluing there, but it's not too bad. All right, so what we did with these guys here is I just curled these out like so. Okay, just to kind of bring them to life. And then I took and I pinched the tips like that. So I'm taking these two fingers, putting them underneath, and then taking my pointer finger and pushing down to kind of cup it. And then once it's kind of cupped a little bit, I can just take these two fingers and just push it together and pinch it. Literally just pinching it, okay? Just like that. All right, so we're pinching that. So, what I did when I was assembling these flowers, I basically created an assembly line, okay? I did a little bit of inking on these in just a darker green. I did a little bit of inking on these as well, just in a little bit of a darker green, not too much. Once I had that all done, I went to the next step here, which was putting the little tendrils on. And I literally just did all 4 sides. And then I took my tendrils and just glued them on. You'll notice that on this larger piece, there's a little score mark that fits the shape of the bottom of this. And it tells you pretty much how far to place it. Okay, just make sure that you have your light green color up. Okay, if you're off by a little bit, it's not the end of the world. No one's gonna see this inside part anyway, but we'll just get these on here like so. Okay, just like that. And once we have the flower on here, we'll go ahead and curl these, because you'll see here on the final flowers how these little tendrils are kind of curved, they're trained. I trained them nicely to give them a little bit more dimension. So, okay. So let's go ahead and put together the flowers here. And what we want to do, you'll notice you're going to have a lot of these petals, but each flower, same color. I didn't do any inking on the flowers because there's so many layers that the shadows are going to have a field day, kind of creating a lot of interest with these papers. You can ink it if you want, you can emboss it, you can do whatever you want. But for each flower, you're basically looking for 2 of the same size, 2 of the same size, and 2 of the same size. Okay, so 2 each of each size, and then 1 piece for the middle. Okay, and to put these together, the 2 layers that are large, sorry about that, the 2 layers that are larger, we're actually curling these down. Okay, so I have my texture side here. I'm going to flip it over, and I'm going to curl these this way. So all I'm doing is I'm taking my dowel, a 3/8 inch dowel, putting it on one side, putting my finger on the other side, and just running that dowel across the paper while applying pressure with this finger so that it's nice and taut, and just kind of training it, curving it basically. Okay, so this one's going to curve this way, as is this one. So I'm training it upside down, so to speak, from the underside. Okay, so that's going to go on like that. And then the rest of these are going to be trained upward. So my texture side is up, and I'm curving them up. Now, as you're doing this, try to visualize a progression. Okay, so meaning with these pieces that are going up, these petals here, we want them to curl up like halfway. Okay, now with this next layer, we want to curl these even more. We want this curl to be even more significant. So, you know, wrap it around that dowel even more to kind of make it train in more. Okay, so you can see these side by side. This one, you may not be able to see it from this angle. This one curves out a little bit. This one is a little bit more pronounced. And if you don't get it, it's not the end of the world. You can always kind of fluff things up later on once it's on the actual foam ball. Okay, and again, these last 2 layers, these are going to be flared up or trained upward. Okay, and then what I did on this last layer, these are both the same size. I actually took and I bent this in even more, like that. Okay. And a lot of this you're going to have to repeat once it's on the topiary or on the actual foam ball, because it may not stick, especially while we're gluing and things of that nature. So don't worry too much about the final look of the flowers just yet, because we still have a little bit of time before we need to worry about that. Okay, so I'm taking this, I'm also curling this, and now this one, I'm going to take and just kind of squeeze it and pinch it in my hand. And I also want to take the tops and like almost bend them over. It's almost like you're creasing it and bending it over, but just gently creating a nice curve to where they're almost pointing down in there. They're not quite. They're almost horizontal, if anything, but it kind of looks like they're pointing down. Okay, so that's kind of the look we're going for. So once we have all these guys trained, we're going to take this piece and we're going to put our first petal down, and it's just going to go right smack in the center like that. So we're just going to put a little bit of glue right in the middle here. Okay, and just stagger or just rotate it so that these 2 petals here, so that you have petals between each of the actual leaves. Okay, and then just push down. Make sure that you have it nice and centered and nice and spaced so that you have a nice little symmetrical look there. And just push down. And then go ahead and put a little bit more glue there in the center. And get that nice and spaced. Make sure that you're offsetting the petals so that they're not right on top of each other. You want to kind of stagger them. Okay, so that they kind of alternate. You don't want to put them right on top of each other. Okay, so we got the 2 big ones on there. Now we're gonna use the next largest size, or the smaller size, one size smaller. And again, just offset that petal there. Just make sure that you've got it nice and centered, that you're offsetting it so that these petals here are not on top of the last layer that we put down. Pretty straightforward. Put a little glue down, again, offsetting the petals. Make sure you've got it nice and centered. There, like that. And just push and squeeze that on there. If it's off just a tad, it's not the end of the world. It'll still look nice. Okay, and then grab your next one. Just a dot of glue will do the job. Get that petal offset. Make sure it's nice and centered. There we go. You can just squeeze that. I'm just kind of squeezing it between my fingers there. Okay, last of the apricot petals. Make sure that's nice and offset. Just kind of staggering the little petals there. Okay, that's good. Then we'll take our final little piece that we gave some extra TLC that we cupped and just pop that right in the center. If you want to use a little dowel to kind of help you push that down, and you see what I mean, as we're gluing it, things kind of retract and go back into their original positions, and that just may happen. And then we've got some of these little gold embellishments that we're just kind of popping in the middle. And I'm just using my dowel here to help me position this. I put some glue on there instead of relying on the sticky back, and then just pushing that down to get it to really adhere, okay? And there's your flower. And then you see the little tendrils there? You can take them and just kind of train them. And a really cool thing to do is take it and just wrap it around the dowel, nice and tight, and then let it go, and then it curls really nicely like that. Just gives you, just makes the whole project that much more interesting. A lot more going on with the light. Okay, just, you know, kind of curl things randomly. Don't make it all the same. And even if you do, that's okay. I'm gonna curl this one that way a little bit, just like that. Okay, so you get the idea. And then if you need to, just kind of finesse some of these. What you want is kind of just a nice transition from top to bottom where each petal is slightly more curved than the other to get a nice finished product. Okay, so there's another flower there. And as you can see, I've got a ton of them here. There's gonna be a total of 10. Okay, they look great together, especially these two colors. So find some nice colors that work together for your topiary. You can make it all in white if you want to. You can't go wrong with that. But let's go ahead and put together one more of these flowers just so that you get the hang of it. Again, 2 of the large, 2 of the medium, 2 of the small, and then 1 tiny one. Okay, so again, with the largest, my texture side is here. Here's my flat side. We're curling these down, okay, because we want the bottom 2 layers to hug and wrap around our styrofoam ball. Okay, just like that. So I'm just training these nicely. And if you overtrain them, it's okay, because that ball is going to kind of push them out anyway. So I wouldn't worry too much about that. And then the last layers here, those are all going to get curled up. So with this one, I'm going to use a 3/8 inch dowel to curl this, and then the next one, I'm going to use this smaller little skewer to give it even a more pronounced curl so that it kind of transitions. It's not the same. There's going to be more variety in between there. So you see how much more that one curls compared to the one that we did previous. Now I already did these two. I would use a really thin skewer or a really thin dowel to do that. same with that one, and then this one here, I'd probably pinch this in a little bit so that the tips are kind of coming in a little bit. Just the tips. I am almost creasing it. I mean, yeah, there's almost a fold, but not exactly. I'm trying to make it round. Occasionally it might look like it's folded, which is fine. And then we've got the really small guy here, and we're gonna curl that in with our tiny little skewer. Okay, and then I'm gonna pinch it to kind of close it up between all my fingers. And then I'm gonna take and kind of push these down. So they're almost like you're trying to almost make it so that the points are pointing down, but they end up kind of pointing horizontally. Just want to be able to see that little contrast there in the orange and yellow. Okay, it just makes it look cool. We kind of did something similar with the sunflower in our autumn calling bundle. Okay, so just like we did with the apricot flower, I'm going to go ahead and put some glue right on there. Get this right in the middle there. So you've got two petals right on opposite sides, on either side of the actual leaf there. And I'm just going to push that down and hold it for just a few seconds while it dries. Get your glue on there, grab your next piece, offset the petals so that they're not, you don't want to put them right on top of each other because that's pointless. You want to offset it, get it nice and centered, nice and spaced out. Make sure you've got it nice and aligned as well. And just push that down, okay? And I'm working a little quickly here, but not really, because there's not much to this. And again, if you want to do inking on these flowers, you can, but I don't think it's necessary. There's so much detail going on already and so much shadow play from the light hitting it that it almost gives the illusion that they're inked. Let me show you what I mean. You see how when that light hits it, doesn't it look like it's inked? Like, look at the tips here. Because of the training, it looks like it's, you know, it looks like there's like 5 different tones of this apricot color. So I don't even think it's necessary, but you totally could if you want. And I'm sure we will see it. It's just that there are a lot of petals and it would be a lot of work inking all these. But, you know, nevertheless, it's not against the rules. I actually encourage it, but I want you to also have fun with this and not feel like it's, you know, a task, because that would be a lot of inking. All right, so I'll get that last one in place there. And you see how we've got that transition where these are coming out this way. The first row of smaller ones kind of curves out a little bit. The second row curves in even more and more and more and more and so on. And that just makes it look much more natural. And again, you can always go in and fluff things up as you see fit. Get that last little piece on there right in the center. Grab my dowel to help me. Just push that down, get it to stay. And where is my, there it is, my last little embellishment. Oops. I'd put some glue down on there instead of relying on that sticky back. Okay, that's a little off center. There we go. Okay. And finally, just want to curl these tendrils. Wrap them around your stick nice and tight to get that nice curly look. Or you can just go like that, and maybe that one doesn't curl as much, and then curl one this way so that when you release it, it comes out that way. And then maybe with this one, we're just going to curl it straight on. Just do whatever, just kind of make it a little random. Okay. All right, so there are my flowers. I just want to show you all of them together because they look so pretty. Look at those. Looks so cool. So we got a total of 10, 5 of each color. Okay, And you know what? At this point, we're ready to start putting this thing together. Okay, so I mentioned earlier that there were a total of 10 flowers. There's actually 11 flowers, so I apologize for that. You should have a total of 5 in the red, or whatever color you substituted for red, and a total of 6 in the apricot, or whatever color you used for apricot. So we've got all the flowers ready to go here. I do want to talk about the bottom leaves here, okay? So let's just go over those real quick here. And these leaves are going to be kind of hanging from the base of our topiary. So what we want to do is we want to train these. I'm going to really give it a good curve here at the bottom so that it droops. And then we're going to flare the tip out to turn it into like an S. Okay, so we want it to kind of droop like that. So from the underside here, we're going to curve it so that it droops. I already did that one. Just really give it a good train here at the bottom, pretty much right where the leaf meets the little support piece. Okay, so train that so that they droop, and then you can train this out so that it flares out. Okay, kind of like that. And of course, once we're actually building this thing, it may kind of fall back into where it wants to go, and we may have to retrain it. Now these little leaves here, we're gonna flare these out and do the same thing, basically. So we're kind of creating like a little S shape. Okay, so you want to do that to all of your pieces here. Just train it into a nice little S curve. Okay, and I embossed this with a nice dark green, and inked it with a nice dark green, embossed it with a Dries crackle or crinkle embossing folder. We'll be sure to give you all the details here. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put a circle of glue around this, and what you're going to do is you're going to line this up so that that half or quarter circle matches up with the circle there, and you want this in the middle of these two. And we're just going to go around in a circle and position those appropriately, just like that. Okay. And last but not least, that one there. There we go. Okay. So we're going to let that really set, and I want to curve this back even more so that it's kind of just running down the dowel. Okay. Kind of like that. Okay, and then we can actually train that down a little more too. Just like that. And again, we're going to end up finessing this even more once we actually get it on our ball. So I have my painted dowel here. I didn't paint the bottom of it. I kind of shoved it into the foam so that I had a little platform for it to sit while I painted it, so I didn't have to paint it on a table. Okay, and here is our styrofoam ball. Okay, so what I'm going to do to make inserting the dowel easier is I'm just going to take this and I'm just going to start with a skewer just to poke a little hole in there, and then I'll kind of wiggle it around just to kind of get it going. Okay, and then you can go ahead and take your dowel, just shove it in and make sure that you've got it nice and even and that it's sitting upright, that it's straight. Okay, get it in there pretty good. You want about 5.5 to 6 inches here, and then the rest of it should be in your actual planter. Okay, so if we kind of measure that, we've got 1, 2, 3, that's about right. Okay, you can kind of mess around with that a little more if you want. Okay, I might shove that in just a little bit more. Okay, so far so good. Okay, so let's go ahead and get our hot glue ready here. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna begin by threading this up and against the bottom of the styrofoam here. Okay, so what we wanna do, we'll pull this back down, and we can go ahead and, let's see if you can see that. There you go. You're just gonna put some glue along the base of this thing, just right around the dowel, should be fine. Okay, just make sure you don't get any of those little strands going anywhere. And just push that down and sandwich it really good, and just be patient while this sets. You don't want to make a mess. You don't want to move on too quick. You want to make sure this sits nicely, gets a good hold, so that we can train this later on when we have all the flowers on here. Okay, so just be very patient. Wait till I can feel that it's hot. I'm gonna wait to move on until this thing is nice and cooled off and that glue has a chance to really set. Okay, and it's kind of just flared out right now, but again, we're gonna push this down eventually. I don't want to do it yet because it's going to pull the glue away. So just hold it there and leave it be until you don't feel any more heat coming off of this. And then that's going to tell you that it's pretty much ready for action. Okay, so this is actually pretty cool to the touch. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to take these bottom leaves here and just fold them over so that they're kind of just pointing down like that. And then I'm going to do the same with this. Just kind of push it down ever so slightly, just very gently. You can kind of take all of this and just kind of cup it down and just kind of squeeze very gently so that it kind of sits like that. Okay. Just like that. So that's looking really sharp so far. And let me just bend that down a little bit more. Okay, that looks great. All right, so at this point we can go ahead and begin hot gluing our flowers on. And the idea is that we're gonna put 5 of the, 5 of the 6, in my case, apricot on the bottom. All of the center row is going to be the cherry color, or whatever color you've designated, and then we'll top it with 1 apricot color. So what I want to do is I'm going to start at the top, okay? So let's go ahead and take one of our flowers and get some hot glue on it, and we're going to adhere it right to the top. So just go ahead and get some hot glue right in the center of the bottom there. And let's strategically make sure that we're getting this right dead center on top of our little topiary. And then once you have it placed, take a look from this angle too, and make sure that you have it nice and centered up there. Okay, it's standing up. Make sure that it's nice and centered. Okay, and then what we can do, if you want, you may occasionally want to maybe just glue down a few of these green leaves. So just put a little touch of hot glue on one of these green leaves here, and that's going to just help this whole thing sit better. Okay, so just be patient while that glue dries. Otherwise you're going to have it coming off and you don't want that. And if you have any little tendrils that are kind of tucked under, this is a good time to get them out. Okay, and of course, because I'm pushing down on top here, we're going to need to go in and finesse some of these petals as we go. But that seems to be on nicely. I have it nice and centered. Okay, so I'm very happy with that. Okay. There we go. So far, so good. It's looking cute. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is we're going to work on the bottom here, and we're going to grab our apricot colors. And the idea is to try to get those petals tucked in there as best as you can. Okay, just try to tuck them in there, kind of sandwich them in there so that we have just about this much space left. Right about there. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and just begin gluing this down. And I'll get some hot glue on the back of this. Now this one I accidentally hot glued off camera and I had to peel it off. So don't worry about that. And again, just try to shove it in there nicely so that it's covering up some of that area down there. Just shove it in as far as it'll go and just hold it in place while it sets. Okay, and again, we are going to need to finesse some of these petals once we're done because I am kind of pushing them down. Okay, and like for example here, this little floral or the leaf portion is fine. This one's going to be okay too. I may want to, for the sake of making the rest of this process easier, and again, it doubles as a little element that'll cover up the green ball, I'm gonna maybe just put a little bit of glue on the back of this and just press that down against the foam ball so that it sits better. Okay. Now, if you want to, if you by chance have some petals that maybe are sticking out too much as well, you can definitely apply a little bit of glue to the back of that as well and just sandwich that against the foam ball. The idea is those bottom leaves, bottom petals I should say, should be kind of hugging the foam ball. Okay, and that's also going to make it easier to put our next piece down as well. Okay, so we've got one down. This guy here can stick out, that's fine. And just use your best judgment when you're doing this. Grab your next flower and maybe try to offset where the little green leaves are on here and try to put this one in the middle maybe. And just make sure that you're also sandwiching them down into the bottom of the topiary, but also making sure that you're getting a little bit of overlap on the neighboring flower as well. Okay, so it should look kind of like that. And again, there's going to be some finessing involved after the fact, but it's going to look really cute once we're all done here. So let's go ahead and get some glue on the back of this guy here. And let's position them into place. I have to kind of just shove it in there, jam it in. I have to move some of the little petals around. Just keep it pretty low on there. Okay. And just hold that down. Make sure that it gets a good chance to really set. And now we're making some progress here. Okay. All right, so we've got our second one in place. And then as you can see here, this one here is going to go right about here, and it should pretty much cover up everything and overlap over the apricot colors nicely as well. Okay, so grab my next little apricot color. Try not to scrunch the leaves too much there at the bottom. Gotta get another glue stick in here. No, not quite yet, almost. Okay, so get your glue on the bottom of the next one. Dab it a little bit so you don't. Okay. And again, just kind of jam it down in there as best as you can. Get a little bit of overlap and just push that down into place. There we go. That looks solid. And we should have enough room for 2 more there. Okay. Now I see some little areas here where I can definitely take my hot glue. Like this one here, I'm gonna actually go ahead and adhere that to the ball. I'm just gonna push and hold that down right there. And I'm gonna leave that one alone, but I'm also gonna adhere that one there because I think that's gonna be fighting with our cherry color here once we begin putting that on. So I'm just gonna press that up against the ball. Okay, that's looking nice. All right, so moving right along here. And you can see here, we'll position this one here and position this one here so we have really good coverage. Okay, so go ahead and get your glue on the bottom of the next one. And again, kind of just jam it in there really good so that those lower petals are going down as far as you can possibly get them. Okay. And if you need to kind of push them in even more, you can do that. And make sure you've got some overlap there. Make sure that it's down far enough. And just hold it while it sets. It doesn't have to be totally perfect. Just get it in the ballpark and you'll be in good shape. Okay, so we're just gonna grab our last one here and get our hot glue on there. Get rid of any of those little strands and sandwich that right in between these two that are here. Okay. So don't be afraid to really overlap these as you go. I think I maybe didn't overlap enough in some areas, and now this one's a little tight, but it's still gonna look really good. So that's all that really matters in the end. And can't go wrong with a topiary. Okay, and again, we're gonna need to probably do a little bit of finessing on some of these petals, but I think we pretty much got that layer nicely in place, and we can just finish it off by putting our red layer on here. Now, kind of rotate this a little bit and add a little bit of glue to some of the green leaves here that may make it more difficult for us to place the red leaves on here. We've got tendrils here, we've got some leaves here, we've got some leaves here, so that's fine. This one here, I'm gonna glue that one down too. I don't need all of them sticking out, but it is nice to have them there because they kind of fill in the little topiary landscape here and make it look really nice. So that looks great. Okay. All right, so getting close here. Grab your next little flower, get your hot glue on there. Make sure you don't have any of those strands. And let's get that placed on there nicely. Nice overlap on top, nice overlap on the bottom, and just press and hold until it's really set. Okay, and then you can decide if you want more of the red showing or if you want to tuck the red under the orange, so you have more of the orange showing. I don't think it really matters. Okay, so that looks like it's got a pretty good hold. All right, let me grab my next one here. And get my hot glue on the bottom. Okay, and just position that one right next to it. Get a nice amount of overlap on top, on bottom, and on the side. Don't be afraid to really get them next to each other there. And just push and hold that in place. There we go. It's looking lovely. Definitely going to need to do some finessing on this, but that's totally fine, as expected, because we are kind of pushing down in some of the areas that we spent some time working on. Okay, so I'll grab my next one here, get my hot glue on there, and let's move over to this side here. Make sure that we've got a nice overlap on top and on the bottom, and just push and hold that in place. And don't worry so much about the petals fighting for space right now. Definitely want the overlap, and we want to make sure that these petals, we're going to try to get them to hug the ball a little bit more. So as you can see here, well, maybe you really can't. It's kind of dark in there, but that one of the leaves that we glued down is kind of covering up that area really nicely there. Okay, so 2 more flowers to go, and let's just take a look here. Make sure that we've got this spaced correctly. Yeah, it looks like we do. Looks pretty darn good. So go ahead and get your glue on the bottom of this guy. And find that magical spot where you've got just enough overlap on the top, bottom, and on the side. And just push that in place. And that just leaves one little spot there for the last flower, and we'll be good to go here. Okay, that seems to be holding nicely. So grab our last flower here, add our glue, and pop that right there into that little gap. Ow. Hot glue is trying to burn me. Ow. Geez, hot glue, so dangerous. Okay, just hold that in place. Give it a second, or 2 or 3 to really hold. And once the hot glue's got a good hold on it, again, we're gonna just take and finesse a lot of this to make it flow better. And you know what, I'm not even against, if you've got too much of the greenery in some places, I wouldn't even mind just trimming some of it off if you got too much competing. Okay, so just kind of taking this thing and twirling it around, taking a look at it, I'm actually very pleased with how this turned out. One thing you can do though is just kind of spin it around, and in some places just make sure you've got a little bit of green poking out. If you feel that maybe you've got too much green in one little area, by all means you can just go ahead and cut some of it away and just get rid of it, just like you would if you were working with floral. And you want to go ahead and kind of fluff some of these petals out again, because they did get kind of crushed, especially these middle sections here where I was probably applying most of my force. You want to kind of bring those back to how we had them when we initially trained them. Okay, and just add some more dimension to the project by bringing these
little petals back to life. Okay, so I'm gonna just do most of this off camera, but the idea is to just have as much dimension on this as you possibly can. But I think it looks lovely, and I've been looking forward to this project for quite some time, as I've already decorated my table for Thanksgiving, and I had in mind that I wanted to do paper floral for the centerpiece, so that's what I have here. Here is our little container that we've already put together. Okay, so I was at Michael's and I picked up some of these decorative fillers, and they're pretty heavy, so I'm just going to take and dump some of these in here. Trying not to get them into the hole where I'm putting my actual dowel. Just plug that up, shake it around. So that's going to make it nice and bottom heavy, okay? And then we can go ahead and put our topiary in there. Now my hole has been kind of loosened up because I've been doing some testing with it and so on, but I will put some hot glue on this and then pop it right in there. Okay, make sure that it's nice and centered and level, and give that just a few moments to dry. And then I'm just going to decorate it and just fill the top with some of this moss that I also picked up at Michael's. Let me get this hot glue gun out of the way before I really burn myself. There we go. And it's okay if you've got a little bit of it kind of hanging out, but there is your final product, and it is adorable, if I do say so myself.